Transformers. This is a series that we started a few weeks ago, and we're continuing on today with part 3. But our first part that we had the very first week of Transformers, we learned that before we can be Transformers, we must first be transformed. We learned the following week that the transformation process is a faith process, and it does require input on our part. God wants us to be partners with Him. He doesn't want to do everything for us. Today, we're going to go beyond that transformation process and start exploring what it's like to be transformers. Transformers in the marketplace. This is a transformer. This is a toy transformer. It's just like that truck up there. For every little boy, that's cool. For me, it's cool. Transformer, just like that. And this is the time of year when all of those things are on the shelves. When you go to Walmart, when you go to Kmart, when you go to Target, you're going to see Transformers on the shelves, along with many other toys. This Transformer here is Optimus Prime, the leader of all the Transformers. He's like the main guy. He's the main good guy. This is Bumblebee. He's more of a younger guy. But this is Optimus Prime. He's a big tractor trailer Peterbilt. Can do a lot of work. But if you take this transformer and you work on this transformer, and it transforms, this, of course, is the little kids version, a couple steps. There's some that takes 18 different steps to get him to transform, and they're like this. This is a 2-step process. But what happens if you get this transformer and you're trying to transform it and it doesn't transform? It's claiming to be a transformer. You sold it, you bought it, they sold it, you bought it as a transformer. It's still a good truck. You could spend time still playing with it as a truck. Wheels roll, everything. It's colorful. But if it doesn't transform, it's not a transformer, is it? What good is it to you as a transformer if it's not transforming? You have one of 2 things you can do with it, or one of 3 things. You can just let your kid play with it as a truck and just kind of accept the fact that you bought a defective piece of equipment. You can take it back and stand in the long lines to return it because it's defective, or you can throw it away. Revelation 3:15 says, I know all the things you do, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were one or the other. I wish that if you're going to claim to be a transformer, that you transform. But if not, then just claim to be a truck or just claim to be a robot. I wish that you were one or the other. But since you are like lukewarm water and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. I will throw you away. That's some pretty tough words, isn't it? Transformers in the marketplace. What does that look like? What does it mean for us to be transformers in the marketplace? Transformers going through Tampa. Not inside this building. We have to go beyond this building. God's calling us to be transformers. If we're going to claim to be Christian, if we're going to claim to be His transformers, because that's what Christians are, they are the transformers in the communities. If we're going to claim that, then we need to live that. So how do we live that in the marketplace? How do you live being a transformer effectively at work, at school, at the grocery store, in the long lines, Black Friday? How are you going to live it then? When everybody's trying for the one piece of equipment that's there for this great price. I've had to work it, and I can tell you that it becomes, people will fight over a towel, a 50-cent towel. I've seen them slugging it out over a 50-cent towel. That's crazy. That's crazy. How do we perform in the marketplace as transformers? Altitude determines attitude. Altitude determines attitude. Think about that. Remember we talked about the renewing of our minds? Attitude determines altitude. There's this story of these 3 guys, bricklayers. And they're going about their business, laying the brick, putting on the mortar, putting on a brick, putting on the mortar, putting on a brick. Out in the hot sun, they're sweating, they're working hard, they're doing their job, and somebody walks by, curious as to what they're building. Now, if you've been driving through town and you see a new building going up, you're curious as to what's going up there, aren't you? And sometimes it's actually being built before they ever put signs up to say what it is. And as it starts being constructed, you start seeing the shape of it, and you start saying, I know what that is. Some of them you can figure out, but sometimes you can't. And so this lady asked the guy, what are you building? And he was upset, and he said, what does it look like I'm doing? I'm laying brick. She wasn't satisfied with that, so she asked the second guy, what are you doing? What are you building? And he said, with a little less animosity and just not wanting to really deal with her, but he still answered her question. He said, I'm building a wall. Well, there's a lot of wall building going on, but what are you building? You know, she still wanted to know. That wasn't satisfaction enough. So she went to the third guy and she said, what are you building? And he stood up from bricklaying. And he took a breath. And he wiped the sweat from his brow. And he smiled. And he said, I'm building a church. Attitude determines altitude. Which one of those three do you think is going to get up in the morning and want to go to work? The third one, the one that had a purpose, the one that realized that he wasn't just building, just wasn't putting brick after brick together. Those bricks, he was seeing the vision of what it was going to be. He knew that there was something worthwhile being done, and he was a part of it. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. We get caught up in those things to where it's the pressures of our jobs, the pressure of school, the pressure of just every day, the traffic jams. We get caught up into that, thinking that's at some point all there is. But it's not. Let God transform you by changing the way you think about it. The guy who thought that he was building a church was living a much more rewarding, fulfilling job. Much more rewarding, fulfilling life. The guy that thought he was just bricklaying, I bet he hated his job. And the other guy that was building the wall, at least he felt like he was doing something. But he still didn't see the whole picture. God expects us to be, as transformers in this world, to be the exceptional. And you can't do that if your thinking is messed up. 3 John chapter 1, verse 2 says, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health just as your soul prospers. When we're transformers in the marketplace, we are affected and we affect others by who we are, by what's internally happening in our lives. I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health just as your soul prospers. Exercise the fruits of the Spirit. If you are going to be, if I am going to be, if we are going to be transformers, doing the will of God, we need to exercise the fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience. Have you ever been to work? Have you ever been to work or school or wherever you may be, and you've been around somebody that's exercising the fruits of the Spirit? Man, aren't they so much better to be around than the one who's exercising the criticism? Or the one that's angry? Or the one that's depressed? If we are to be transformers, we need to be exercising the fruits of the Spirit. So we need to be aware of what's happening in our lives every moment. We kind of get into this routine and cycle. I mean, I was driving the other day, heading to work, and I took a wrong turn. And I got stuck behind, must have been 30 school buses coming out of a place. But it was because I wasn't thinking when I got to that red light. It was the next light that I wanted to turn at. But I turned just out of a routine. When we live our lives like that, we miss out on so many opportunities to be transformers, doing the will of God. So if we exercise the fruits of the Spirit, we will see results. Just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so can you identify people by their actions. In Colossians 1, chapter 1, verse 9, it says, and this is Paul and them where they were praying for the Colossians. And they said to them, we ask God to give you spiritual wisdom and understanding. Spiritual wisdom and understanding. Be aware of your surroundings. Know what's going on throughout your day. Sometimes you may catch yourself getting off track. Let God get you right back on track so that you can continue to be a transformer and you can start developing that more fully and completely. Then the way you live will always honor and please the Lord, and your lives will produce every kind of good fruit. That's a promise. If we're going to make an impact in society, if we're going to make an impact in a community, if we're going to make an impact in the marketplace, we need to exercise the fruits of the Spirit. One of the fruits of the Spirit is patience. Sometimes we get impatient when we try to influence somebody for good. Don't be impatient. Exercise the fruits of the Spirit, patience and love and joy. Nurture somebody. You can be a transformer or a demolition man. That is your decision. There was a young man I knew once that he was working with me, and he started asking these questions. Different questions about the Bible and about God and stuff. And I told him, I said, look, we have a job to do right now. We've been assigned to take care of this. Let's take care of it. If you still have questions, I'll be glad to sit down with you at lunch or after work or whatever. But let's get this taken care of like we're supposed to be doing. And then you ask me whatever. If I have an answer, I'll give it to you. I'll show you. We can look through the Bible and find it. I said, if I don't have an answer, we'll find it. We'll find somebody that does have an answer. So he said, okay. So we started looking through the Bible like several weeks, almost every day. And then one day he was telling me he wished that he was able to read more, but he didn't even have a Bible. So I gave him a Bible. And I felt pretty good about that. But I came back to work the next day, and this guy, I was suddenly his enemy. He wanted to be transferred from my truck to another truck. We were doing electrical work. He wanted to be transferred from my truck to another truck because I was shoving religion down his throat. And so they asked me about it, and so I told them, and they said, don't worry about it, we'll just swap. And I said, that's fine. He never talked to me for months. We would pass in the parking lot where all the trucks were, and he never spoke. Never spoke. But then, around Christmas time, they were having a company party. And he was getting ready to move. He was going to Miami to live with some of his family. And this guy came up to me, as a young man, he came up to me, and he started to cry. And he said, I want to apologize to you for how I treated you. And I said, don't worry about it. And he said, well, let me explain what happened. He was living with a girl, and her family was putting pressure on her to move out. And so she did. And he said that he went and he laid down on he went to his dresser, and he got his gun, and he laid down on his bed, and he pulled back the trigger, and he got ready to kill himself. And he said he was ready to pull the trigger, and he had no hope And he says, at that moment, he said, I thought of you. I thought of the Bible that you had given me. And actually, just before that, he cried out, God, if you're real, help me. And he said that's when he thought of me, and he thought of the Bible that I'd given him, and he said, he started thinking, where'd I put it? So he put down the gun, and he got up, and he went to his dresser drawer, and he pulled out the dresser drawer, and he starts going through his clothes and stuff, and he had buried it in one of his dresser drawers. So he got it out, and he said, if you're real, God, talk to me. And he opened it up, and he says, I swear, I just opened it up, and I started reading, and the words were just like God was talking directly to me. And he said, I want you to know that Bible saved my life. And I'm going now to be with family, so I'll have a better support team around me. And I'm going to share with them what I've been learning. I never seen him again, so I don't know how the rest of his life went. But I do know this. If we are transformers in the marketplace, let God take care of it. Patience is a fruit of the Spirit. Don't be impatient. Don't think that just because you're living that life that nothing's happening. It takes a plant underground time to grow before it pops out to the surface. Transformers are partners with God. God doesn't want to do all this by himself. He could. He says he could, but he doesn't want to. He wants us to partner with him because at the same time, while we're transforming lives and doing those things that are transforming lives, it's transforming our life. Work willingly at whatever you do as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that? Work as though you were working for the Lord rather than working for people. In the marketplace, we got to stop thinking about how many converts we can get to this church. We've got to start having a paradigm shift in our mind and our thinking process and recognize that God cares about the company you work for. He cares about the people you work with. He wants you to be a transformer of companies. He wants you to be a transformer of nations. He doesn't want you to think so small. He doesn't want us to think that small, that all he wants is for us to put numbers in these seats and to fill these seats with people. That's not what it's about. If you want to be a transformer, God requires character traits in our lives that will do that. People of character. You know, it used to be that if you at least in Adventist circles, and maybe in other circles, I don't know, but I know in Adventist circles, it used to be if you didn't feel called to be a pastor or a teacher or a doctor or a nurse, and you chose some other profession, somehow, some way, people made you feel like you weren't quite spiritual enough. You had chosen a lesser thing. But God wants us to be ministers in the marketplace. There's a great, great field out there. Peter was a fisherman. Paul was a tent maker. They continued to do those things even when they were ministering. Lives get changed because of you in the marketplace. People will relate to you that won't ever talk to a pastor. People of character. I know some professions get a bad rap. If you're a car salesman, a used car salesman, you get a bad rap. If you're a lawyer, you get a bad rap. They have, what's the joke? Why won't a shark eat a lawyer? Professional courtesy. There's those type of things. If you're a politician, you're corrupt and you're only there for power. Those things aren't true. Yes, those things exist, but those things exist in every profession. You can be any of those things and still be a transformer for God. Look at Abraham Lincoln. He was known as Honest Abe. He was both a politician and a lawyer. Don't let these myths stop you from being all that you should be. God's calling us to be above and beyond. We should be the exceptional employees. We should be the exceptional business owners. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God?" When he was talking about Joseph, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? What if that was being said of you? Can we find a man like this? Can we find a woman like this? Can we find a person like this in whom is the Spirit of God? That's how lives are changed. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are." If you're living the life that God wants us to live, if we're living that life and we're working in the marketplace, that's where we spend a lot of our day. A lot of our life is there. If we are there and we're in touch with God, why wouldn't He give us answers, solutions to the problems of a business? He cares about the people that are involved there. He wants their lives to be better. And if in the process they see your godly character, then He gets that added benefit of not only just benefiting their life here on this earth, but saving them for future life. In verse 40, he says, "You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank that's higher than yours." That's pretty impressive. Joseph, someone who was basically sold into slavery by his own brothers, could have lived the rest of his life in complete anger. And there was opportunity later in life even to get justice. But he didn't do that because God had been working in his character and he became a man of character. When Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him, he ran. When his brothers didn't know who he was, but they were right there in front of him, he could have had them executed. He had all power to do whatever. Pharaoh said, if you say it, they do it. If you don't say it, they don't do it. They don't lift a hand or a foot without you saying so. But he showed them mercy. He had justice, but he showed mercy. God was working on his character. That is transforming. Because God was able to transform Joseph, Joseph transformed a nation. They went through drought, and through that drought, 7 years of drought, not only was Egypt spared because of the food that had been prepared ahead of time and stored up ahead of time. Not only was that the case, but every nation around came to them to be saved. Every nation around was influenced, and you can bet that word got out all over that this was because Joseph got answers from God. There was a lady who worked for a Fortune 500 company, and they were purchasing another company. And they did their due diligence. Everything looked good. The deal was going through. And when she went home, she had a dream that there was something wrong with the deal. And she had details of what was wrong with the deal. So she came back the next day, and she went to her chief financial officer. She went to her CFO, and she said, kind of reluctantly, there's some fraud going on in that company. We need to rethink what we're doing. And he says, how do you know that? Who told you that? And this is where she got real kind of reluctant. But she said, God told me that. That took guts for her to say that. But it took faith, and she believed it. So he says, okay, I'll check it out. So he sent them back to do a review, and he gave them the details that she had given. So they did the review using those details, and they came back and they said, they gave the report to him, and he told her, he said, everything that you said was true, down to every last detail. He said, I've just got one more question. And she says, what? He says, did God say anything to you about me? When we will allow ourselves to be in tune with God's Spirit, and we will allow Him to work in our lives, we will make a difference in people's lives. Transformers in the marketplace. Before you can be a transformer, you must be transformed. Can you imagine the impact that we could have on Tampa? Can you imagine that if we were to go and expand the influence from within these walls to every location in this town that you have contact with? We could transform Tampa because of what God has done. People look at your character. If you don't think they do, let me tell you a little story. When I was younger, we were living in South Florida, and my dad was working and my mom was working, and he had just had back surgery. And so he was laid up with back surgery. So he wasn't able to work. And then her job, her company, decided they were going to relocate. So they offered some of their people to relocate from South Florida to Central Florida, and they would pay for the move. They would bring the trucks, they would load everything up, they would move you. and they would pay for the move. So because my dad was already laid up, and it was going to be a while before he was able to work again, rather than look for another job, they decided we should move. So we did. We moved to Sanford, Florida. Nice little town. And we moved there, and there were 2 Seventh-day Adventists that worked for that company. My mom was one of them, and there was another lady. I don't know her name. But they had off from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. So anytime there was work on Saturday, they didn't have to come in. One day, after they had been moved, the company had been relocated into Sanford, one day they called both of them into the office. And they had a seat and they said, "Look, we know that both of you are Seventh-day Adventists, and both of you have off during these hours. We need people during these hours, but we understand that that's what you believe. We had somebody investigate you and follow you everywhere you went. And they told my mom that that everything that she said she believed, she was living. Every week she was at church. The way she conducted her life was the way that she said she believed. So she would still have Saturdays off, no problem. There was no, don't worry about it. But as for you, they said to the other lady, you did everything opposite of what you said you believed. You were never at church. You were in the local taverns. You were doing all these different things that you said you were against. And you were not living your life as you said. So therefore, you can either come to work or find another job. Don't think that people aren't watching you. I mean, don't stress over that. Don't panic over that. Because if God's keeping you and God's developing in your character, then you're all right. You have nothing to worry about. But if you want to be a transformer in the marketplace, if you want to really have an effect on what happens in Tampa, then you must have those things going on. You must have a mindset that focuses on transforming. You must have the fruits of the Spirit working in your life and the ability to keep thinking about that. If you're having a bad day and you're stressing, ask God before the day starts that if it gets to that point and you're stressing and you're frowning, for Him to bring a thought to your mind that says, it's time for a smile. It's time to kind of lighten things up a little bit. It's time to realize that there's more to this than this little stress moment that I'm having. Remember the guy in the sermon a few weeks ago that I told you about that told me he was an atheist and didn't believe in God and told me that I was not to talk to him? I was a project manager and I was now doing houses in the same community. He had houses, I had houses, another 2 other guys had houses. And he told me, I know you're a Christian, don't talk to me. And I said, Oh, don't talk to me about God. I said, okay, no problem. I'm serious. Do not talk to me about God. Remember that story? You remember what happened? As time went on and the market was crashing and people were getting laid off, and there were several cuts that came and we both survived, he started coming to me and saying, they're in the neighborhood. They're laying off. Why aren't you stressed about this? Because I have nothing to worry about. I don't have to worry about that. I'm okay with it. I bet you were praying. And the first time I told him, I bet you were praying this morning. The first time I told him no, but I was with a friend this morning and he had prayer for me. And he was like, oh, and then he went on. But all I had done over a period of time was I didn't talk to him about God. What I did do, though, was when I went to lunch, I asked him if he wanted to go. When he left early, I took care of his houses for him. Made sure they were closed up and locked up after trades had been there. When he called me for a favor, I responded. When he said something about his son, I followed through with it and asked questions. The first time he said that, we both survived those cuts. The next time he came to me and he says, Ed's in the neighborhood and he's laying guys off. Everybody's being called to the office. And I said, I know. And he says, you're not stressing. I said, no, I'm not stressing. I'm okay with it. And he says, were you praying? And I said, well, yeah, I prayed about it. I said, I know that God will take care of me. He took care of me getting here, and He'll take care of me after. It'll be all right. And he says, could you pray for me? This is a guy who claimed he was an atheist, but he said, can you pray for me? And so I did. I prayed for him. And the way that day finished out was I did get laid off that day. And it's turned out to be a major, major blessing for me. He kept his job that day. He got to see answer to prayer. You see how God works? He wants to make us into transformers. He wants us to have an effect on this world. Transformers in the marketplace. That's who we are. That's what we should be. That's what we can be and will be through the power of God if we will but allow it. But it does take an awareness. God is a mighty God. And He works with us even with all of our flaws. I know I've got my share of them. Some of you could probably name some of them, but I've got my share of them, I know. We all do. But He's chosen this avenue to work through us, to transform a community, to transform a business, to transform the marketplace, to transform a nation. God transformed nations in the past. He can transform nations now. And you know why transformers in the marketplace are so important? It's because that's the lifeblood of a nation, is the marketplace. If you transform the marketplace, you've transformed the nation. In your bulletin, you'll find a connection card. And I would like to encourage everybody to really seriously take a look at this. These commitments are just between you and God. But I want you to realize that there's power in prayer. There's power in us praying for each other. Yeah, it's all about out there. But there's strength that takes place in here. So if you take out your connection card, and if you fill out whatever information you feel comfortable with filling, if you're a guest, please put down some contact information. If you're a regular member, just if you share your name or whatever, that's good. Or if you have information that's changed, please fill that out. The next steps are on the back, and there's 3 of them here. Lord, develop my character to have a transforming influence in the marketplace. Is that your desire today? If that's your desire, mark that down. I know that's something I want more of. If that's your desire, mark that down. Lord, open my eyes to recognize transforming opportunities in the marketplace. How many times do we miss an opportunity because we were thinking about the wrong stuff? Open my eyes to recognize transforming opportunities in the marketplace. If that's your desire, check that. And finally, Lord, help me demonstrate the fruits of the Spirit in the marketplace. You're having a bad day, still smile. You're having a bad day, let God put joy in your life. Someone's giving you a bad day, have patience. A soft answer turns away wrath, Proverbs says. If this is your desire, Lord, help me to demonstrate the fruits of the Spirit in the marketplace. Then check that. I'm going to give you a minute or so to fill that out as John plays some music. And I'm going to have a seat. And then we'll collect these with the tithes and offerings in just a minute.